ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Coresight Research and Blue Yonder's new web series, Open for Business.
Thanks, Drew, and good morning, and welcome to Open for Business, a new webinar series with Coresight Research and Blue Yonder. We will be featuring weekly industry leaders and in-depth conversations with them. I'm your co-host, Deborah Weinswig, and I'm honored to be joined by my co-host, Joanne Martin, who is the VP of Retail at Blue Yonder. She has extensive strategic retail experience and a proven track record across apparel, footwear, and accessories, including experience at Lane Bryant, DSW, and Luxottica. In her role at Blue Yonder, she is the industry thought leader for retail, and her expertise also includes merchandise planning, item planning, assortment planning, allocation, and really what's critical right now, omni-channel inventory enablement. With that, I'll turn the call over to Joanne for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Deborah, so much. I'm excited to join this call today and talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the industry. We have the fortune at Blue Yonder to see extensively end-to-end across our supply chain as a platform company. And when we look at kind of some of the conversations and the challenges, there seems to be 5 areas that are major focus right now for retailers. One of them, first and foremost, is cash flow. Cash is king right now and the biggest conversation. That's why we're seeing furloughs and we're seeing different activity and people conserving cash. But the 4 areas that we're seeing with significant traction are within the supply chain space, of course. One of them is in supply chain visibility. Lots of conversations and questions about where's my product in my network? How do I manage my network? How do I have visibility to products and predict my times of arrival? We're using a lot of machine learning and AI to be able to help retailers be able to anticipate when their flow is coming. One of the other places obviously is about forecasting and supply. Many retailers we're talking to this week is about how do I anticipate, not in 2 different ways. How do I anticipate my forecast and my product that I need coming out of COVID? But then there are softline retailers that are buying on lead times for next year. And how do they anticipate what that demand should look like? And how should they be able to normalize flow? So lots of conversations about short-term problems, but also long-term problems about supply and demand. And then of course, we're talking through pricing. There's a lot of lagging inventory that's been in the industry right now, given the shutdown of many stores. How are we managing price? How do we prevent a price war? How do we optimize elasticity within pricing? And then last but not least is obviously workforce management and how do we manage things such as labor in the warehouse as well as labor in the stores when we start to open. And these are kind of the biggest concerns we're hearing right now in the industry and some of the things that we're trying to tackle at Blue Yonder.
Joanne, just one comment. It was interesting. I was on a call this morning with regards to the COVID retail response and this whole supply chain visibility. I mean, it's not only impacting retail, but also everyone who's trying to get PPE into the country. So it's really kind of bigger than us, right?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, one of the things is everybody's trying to figure out, countries are opening at different points in time. It's impacting the entire supply chain from manufacturer to customer. So really trying to understand and leverage technology such as IoT and understanding where the product is. RFID, not a new technology, but definitely something from a sensor, from a beacon standpoint that we're seeing a resurgence in just to try to understand and pinpoint, as well as to define network. You know, we've been talking about nearshoring, offshoring of product. How do we get speed to market and availability? And that is all coming into play now, and how people are actually maximizing their network and their supply chains, not just to bring the product in, but to define where it's being sent to and sourced.
Great. Thanks so much. And with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our special guest, who is very special, Bob DeLoren. Bob is an entrepreneur, pioneer, and innovator with a 35-year history of success in the consumer products, media, and real estate sectors. Today, he is the chairman and CEO of XCEL Brands. For those of you who don't know, XCEL owns Isaac Mizrahi, Judith Ripka, H. Halston, C. Wonder, and many others. He's a true expert in retail supply chain and somebody that we've gone to for years on some of these challenging topics that we're all facing today. So let's get started with, I think, kind of the opening question for all of us, which is, how has this current crisis affected your supply chain process?
Thank you, Deb. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So, first and foremost, in anything like this event, this type of event truly tests the strength of relationships and partnerships. And the trickle-down actions taken from the top, meaning at the retail level, will definitely strain relationships as it relates to, say, wholesalers and factories, because as canceled orders come in or goods are being pushed out to another season, it does create some tension between wholesaler and supplier. I think the key to all of this is to be incredibly transparent and honest. And if we all collaborate fairly through this, we'll get through it. So that's first and foremost in any situation like this. None of us can control external events like COVID-19 or the 2008 collapse in the financial sector. It's just, are you prepared for it, and how do you act when you're in the middle of this?
Yes, I mean, this idea of trust and supply chain right now is incredibly critical. And what has been your biggest pain point to date, and who have you worked with to try and solve that?
I would say our biggest pain point to date has been spring, particularly our April, May, and June goods. We've had some cancellations. Some retailers have been incredibly collaborative in the approach. We're lucky in that part of the DNA of our brands is we tend to not use seasonal fabrics. So our goods tend to be season agnostic, if you will. And we've been able to work through a lot of this with our factories and with our retail partners by moving goods forward to, say, summer season. And then the real challenge will be, well, how do we all deal with fall? Because we're moving spring goods to summer. What should the reduction be in fall so that none of us get jammed up on inventory? So we're working through that now. There will be a reduction. My guess is, how does all of this look? Q2 down 70, Q3 down 50%, and Q4 down maybe 40% from normal levels as we all work through this. Hopefully going into 2021, we get back to a normal business cycle.
When do you think we get back? And we've heard similar numbers. Actually, I would say this week, every week we get more information, but we've started to hear kind of down 40 for holiday, 20, exactly what you just stated. When do you think we get back to 2019 levels, right? I don't even know if we'll reach that in 2021, but how, I mean, you've got to start planning for some of your business now. How are you thinking about that?
So it's hard to say. Deb, I don't think anyone has that exact answer at the moment because this is such a fluid situation. It seems like every day there's some good news and then there's some bad news. And I think the real challenge will be when do we all fire up the production engines again to get back to those 2019 levels. My guess is that is a 2021 event.
Great. And as you're thinking about, some of these innovations that will support, kind of the new XCEL, and what are you seeing? You've always been very ahead of the curve as it relates to adopting new technology, trying new technology. What do you think, right? There's going to be winners and losers that come out of this event. What do you think will define them, and what technologies will they need?
So, it's interesting. The key to all of this, particularly in moments like this, is to manage your inventory, both as a wholesaler and a retailer. And I've been saying for years, and you know this better than most, the key to inventory management has to start in the design and product development stage. And that can only be leveraged through 3D technology and consumer insight testing. And if we all collaborate a little more, consumer insight testing comes in two varieties, if you will. One is in attribute testing and one is in the absolute collection testing. Well, imagine if we could take all of our 3D images and actually test those with our retail partners' customers by region or by zip code, then we get the production and the allocations right in terms of consumer demand so that we can all start giving our customers what they want at the moment in time that they want it. So we've spent a lot of time putting our efforts into consumer insight testing, 3D development, particularly in our jewelry business where the technologies are a little better. But I think that is the future of the industry.
What were some of the changes that you are already making to your supply chain in 2020, and how do you think that'll look in 2021?
So changes that we were making were to get faster, to reduce production cycles. And to some extent, we were looking at how do we bring it closer. So we've done a lot of work around development of microfactories and nearshoring to reduce lead times. The closer you have production to demand, the better. So we've been focused on that for the last 2 years, and we've had a great deal of success with jewelry, and we are still coming up the curve with apparel. But we have been able to reduce lead times significantly, and that has helped us. The other thing that we did is through all of the consumer insight testing that we did, what our findings were is that most consumers are looking for apparel that is not as seasonal. And that has really helped us because we can push our goods forward if we need to, or move them around in seasons. So those are some of the things that we've learned, and so far they're working well for us.
Great. With that, we'll go ahead and launch the poll. So everyone on the line should see that. And if you have any questions during the call today, just use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, please. Bob, I want to continue with this idea of the lack of seasonality in terms of goods and how people want kind of, year-round fashion. When did you see that change? Because I feel, for a long time, right, it was the 4 seasons were really important. Then we kind of went to 16 seasons. What's changed in the consumer's mind, and is sustainability any part of that?
Well, it's not. I don't want to say that there aren't seasons, because I've been preaching 52 seasons, something new every week.
Well, but that's different, right? I mean, something new every week. So that's actually where I think you're very innovative.
So, we tend to think of it as something that's moving in real time, and we have to design into that. It's fabric positioning that is critically important here, so that we're not using fabrics that perhaps are winter, fall fabrics. Of course, color palettes change, but even there, we try to stay somewhat neutral within our brand lens, if you will.
Can you talk about this idea of nearshoring and the microfactories? Because you really were one of the leaders on the microfactory side, and we're now seeing startups who are kind of, really focusing on this. And I think it's more in grocery than in apparel, but maybe you can talk about, the two, because I think they're two of the most important topics right now.
So what we see is there's the potential to develop microfactories. And I would define a microfactory that has the limitations of, say, 1,000 garments per day. So 360,000 garments per year. You can double up in a factory and get to 1 million, or triple up where you have a microfactory doing 1 million units per year. The equipment is fairly automated through spreading, sublimating, printing, and cutting. It gets a little more difficult with sewing. As you know, we've looked at Sobots, and we've been down to Georgia Tech and looked at what's happening down there. And we're not there yet with sewing. If you're doing straight runs, pillowcases, and mats, things like that, you can automate even the sewing there. My guess is we're 5 to 7 years out on fully automating sewing. I just haven't seen anything in the world, and I've looked everywhere at this. But it is without a doubt coming. And to the extent, I think step one will be automated through cutting and then possibly semi-automating sewing. But I think we're beginning to see these things pop up around the country. In fact, I believe Gerber has actually built a prototype in Manhattan that they were getting ready to feature. And then, of course, we were hit with this COVID-19 event, and that's been postponed.
So I know that you've been looking into nearshoring and with microfactories. How does this change your supply chain, number one? And then number two, as you move to more 3D design, which cuts off so much time on the front end of the process, could it be that for this holiday, as people are adopting more of this technology, will we see orders kind of closer to holiday and maybe this, I mean, I'm trying to look for the silver lining. Does this end up with a potentially, better holiday than we would have had otherwise because of the technology that's available?
So I would say at the very high levels, probably no. There are people playing in the fringes with this now. Certainly, the entire industry has worked on shortening lead times. So I think we are going to see the benefit of some of that. And then the other thing that all of us can do, it will drive up cost and maybe reduce margins a bit, but better safe than sorry. We can fly goods and to get the goods here faster. So I think for the companies that really drill down on this and think about how they want to do it, flying goods may be the right way to do it to reduce risk on inventory. And we're in discussions now with all of our factories about what does fall look like and what does holiday look like, and can we all bear the cost of flying goods in so that we're covering everyone's risk.
Well, I mean, one question we've gotten quite a bit right now is what's happening though with air freight capacity, with ocean capacity. The whole supply chain, right, is very disrupted right now. So how does that change holiday, and how do people need to plan differently?
Well, if capacity is completely absorbed and the airline industry and fast boats aren't back up and operating, warehousing isn't operating, then I think we have a real challenge here to deal with for fall and holiday. I don't have a clear answer there. Our strategy.
Your crystal ball isn't working right now?
Yeah, there is no crystal ball for that at the moment. But I would say, to the extent that goods can be moved forward, that's the only strategy that we see now.
One thing we've heard from several retailers, which I don't think I've heard the term in a decade, is packing away. And it goes back to, even though I know we thought this was going to be the year of sustainability, but maybe it is underlying a lot of decisions that are being made, right, where maybe other decisions would have normally been made with that inventory. Instead, they're going to kind of put it away for next year and drag it back out. Obviously, it helps with margins, but I feel like there's a bigger message here.
So, it's interesting. We have looked at that. We have put some units in pack away mode, if you will. We don't think that the raspberries will spoil, so to speak, and we will push that product forward to spring 21. For us, it's not a significant amount of inventory, but we think it's in our best interest to do that. So I think we're going to see more of that. It makes you wonder about trend, coming back to 52 seasons. I suppose that it's safe to do that with core, with the basic core product. There's not a lot of change in that from year to year. Of course, maybe proportions and silhouettes may change, but I don't see anything that radical coming that would preclude taking some of these goods and packing them away and moving them to spring of 21. So I think that is a rational strategy in light of what's going on.
So we in the US don't have live streaming, which really, I think, made a significant difference during the crisis in China, because you were able to have one-on-one relationships with an influencer, a KOL, and in real time you could purchase the good. Bob, you're very fortunate that at XCEL Brands, there's merchandise that's sold on QVC and HSN, which is kind of the US version of live streaming. Can you talk about, as much as you can share with us, how that is shaping the business and what you're seeing and advice?
Yeah, it's interesting. Interactive television tends to be its own universe, if you will. And QVC, where we do a significant amount of our business, has been practicing social distancing, and they are not, or have not to date, allowed on-air guests into the studio. But what we've all learned is we can Skype in and still do the kind of numbers that we were doing before. So there may be some interesting changes that come out of this. I've felt in the past that we could do more remote shows with things like Skype and other technologies, including Zoom. And that may be something that comes out of this that's a bit of a silver lining, because it will make it a lot easier on air guests, particularly ones that travel great distances to get to the studio. So that business seems to be holding very well for us. We are hitting all of our plans, and we're very fortunate to have that business.
So, you talk about selling differently on QVC and communication. How has your communication with your internal employees changed? How are you, kind of sharing with them the results of the business, what's happening, but also how are you able to listen to them, right? Where you'd have that kind of water cooler chit chat. How does that happen now?
So, first and foremost, this coronavirus event is both a human and business crisis. It started as a human crisis, and now it's a very, very significant and somewhat tragic business crisis. We have always been a company that leans into its core values around transparency and fairness in the way we do business. That has not changed with our employees. So now, I do weekly calls with the entire organization. I write weekly updates to everyone. Senior management teams are on the phone daily using Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And we've been able to continue communicating the way we have in the past. It's been remarkable to see our teams rally around what has to be done to get us through this. And at the highest levels, we did everything possible to minimize the impact on our employees, and we will continue to do that, and obviously make some of the hard decisions that we have to make as leaders to preserve the long-term prospects for all of our employees and partners and vendors, as opposed to what's needed for the short term.
It's interesting. We've started to go to daily calls, and I would actually say that, at least from a Coresight perspective, we're finding that there's more transparency and more communication because it's a little more formal as opposed to informal. Are you finding that as well, Bob?
We are, particularly with my senior teams, and it's been interesting because some of the things that you learn in something like this is when everyone puts their heads together and really develops strategies around very challenging situations. It's remarkable. There's the old adage that necessity is the mother of all invention. There is definite truth in that.
And if we were to go back in time and look at, kind of week one for you, when you originally heard about this and changes that you started to make to your business, where do things stand now that, right, the weeks are different for everyone because of when they started to really internalize this? How are you thinking differently now about the business, about volumes, and, how have you changed your strategic focus as well?
So, Initially, we were cautiously optimistic. We thought that, at least based on guidance that's been given to us by various different governors and of course the president, that this would all clear by April 15. And of course, all of this is being extended. My hope is that it's April 30, but it certainly looks like this could go on longer. And what we've done is, one, we've run all of our financial cash flow models, and we have stressed them for the 70-50-40 formula. And we have taken every action possible to conserve cash. We're also fortunate in that we don't have a lot of debt, and we had sufficient liquidity in the company to weather a storm like this. You know, if you talk about what can you do to prepare for an event like this, because these are external events. None of us know when and how they're going to come, but it seems like every 5 or 10 years, something happens like this. And the best defense for something like this is a good offense. And the good offense comes through managing your cash flow and keeping your debt levels down.
In terms of, you bring up a very important point, which is, you know, if we were to go to look back at 9/11 and, you know, the global recession, we're averaging about every 10 years, right? How have those experiences, you know, altered how you approach this experience?
So one, they help you get prepared. The pain and the reality of 2008 is still something that will be deeply burned into my forehead. I will never forget that. And in bringing XCEL forward, it was something that we thought about. We said, well, we know this is coming. We've lived through the S&L failure. We lived through long-term capital. We lived through 2008. Most people forget that one. And we were not as aggressive as perhaps we were before experiencing events like this, because the best way to be prepared is to not overlever an organization and to always have enough cash to take you through this kind of storm.
Have you been surprised, and then I'll go through some of the poll results, have you been surprised at some of the cash positions of retailers who are either your clients or who you know in the industry? Because I agree with you, 2008 had some very clear lessons, but of course the leaders of many of these companies today weren't even in retail in 2008, and they certainly weren't in the roles they're in now.
So the biggest surprise to me was the amount of liquidity that JCPenney has relative to everyone else.
True.
It was very interesting to see them having the longest runway. So that was a bit surprising to see. I think 4.5 to 5 months may sound like it's enough, but when something like this comes along, it makes you rethink that perhaps it's not.
That's a very good point. All right, so if we look at the poll, what is your largest pain point during this time that you need help to resolve? Demand forecasting. Where do you wish you had more robust technology? Demand forecasting. I think there's a theme here, and maybe Bob, you can talk to that a little bit, because I would say this is pretty consistent from what we've heard across the board.
So I would say that demand forecasting in a moment like this is incredibly challenging. There's just no doubt, because it's such a fluid situation and no one really knows what the change in consumer shopping behavior will be. We just don't know. This is either going to be a V-shaped curve where the switch gets turned back on and everyone goes back to life as normal, or this is going to be a very long U-shaped curve, maybe with a flat point on the bottom of that U-shaped curve where people are just going to be reluctant to go into stores again. None of us know that. It's for us, demand forecasting starts with understanding what people want by geography, and that comes through communicating with your customers before you make the product. So, my advice to anyone trying to improve on their demand forecasting is start there, because that's where it has to start. We have to collaborate with the design houses and the manufacturers first, so that we have at least the most intelligent product possible. Then we need to do all the normal things that we do in demand forecasting models. And of course, AI can help there significantly, because there's a lot of variables that go into that.
That was actually the last poll question, which was, are you using AI or ML in your supply chain and forecasting or pricing? I'm actually surprised it's almost 40%. That's phenomenal, but that does seem high. What are your thoughts on, kind of the technology that's out there and the technology you wish you had?
So I think a lot of the new technologies, particularly around demand forecasting, are good. I think they're critically important. I'd like to see more done around allocations. I think that is a critically important part of what any retailer needs to do. And of course, that is the most challenging, because if you get your allocations wrong, can you really move the goods to where they're likely to sell? So I think they're two separate things, but very important to tie together. And from a supply chain perspective, I just think we can all do a better job at making much more intelligent product. In our fine jewelry business, we have the thesis working. We design in 3D, we consumer insight, test in 3D, every conceivable attribute that you can think of. And then we pre-sell from 3D images to get a real read on demand. Then we make them all, then we start producing products. And it all happens in a very short time frame. So we didn't really lose any speed in bringing goods to market. So I think the more that we can do that as an industry, the more accurate we'll be.
Great. Well, I could ask you questions all day, but there's a significant number of questions in the queue. So with that, I'm going to turn the rest of the call over to Joanne for Q&A with you, Bob, from the audience.
Sure.
So, there's a lot of questions out here, but one of them is, Bob, where do you see the US and the European markets opening? What are kind of your expectations? What do you foreshadow? And how do you see that kind of paginating over time? What's your perspective?
So, as I said, none of us really have a great crystal ball at the moment to understand when and how this will happen. We can only look to what's happened in China to get a sense of what may happen here. And if you look at the way China dealt with this, they went through their periods of social distancing and lockdown, and it took them 8 to 10 weeks to really start to get things moving again. So I would anticipate that would be the case here, unless the sheltering in rules stay in place, say through the end of May. Then I think we're 60 days out from end of May. If it ends April, then we're 60 days out from end of April. I think Europe, it's a little more complicated because they were perhaps not as ready as we are in terms of gearing up the medical establishment to deal with what's needed for many of the patients that have contracted this virus. So I would expect that may be a little longer than what we see here.
That's great. Thank you. And, one of the things that this has definitely done is it's redefined how workers engage and what the workforce looks like. Do you have a perspective about kind of what workplace and engagement will look like in retail coming out of COVID? With everybody working remotely and in disparate locations, how do you foresee the workplace kind of transforming a little bit for retail?
So, just on a lighter note, I am sure that if any of our employees are listening to this, they're all voting for more work from home time.
Sure.
I would say, we've all learned some interesting things from this. When you think you can't function the way we're all functioning, something like this happens, and you learn otherwise. That in fact, we do have the technologies today to work efficiently and effectively remotely. So I think what we may see, and this has been something that we've been pushing for the last 2 or 3 years, is that a lot of the buying sort of procedures and processes that are in place with buyers coming out to showrooms, there's really no need for it, particularly if you have 3D lookbooks. And I think what we're going to see over the next few years is a change in how we actually function as an industry now. I think things can become more virtual, if you will. There's no reason why we can't send out fabric swatches and then invite someone to a 3D presentation to what a collection will be, but that's going to take time before that happens. The real silver lining in all of this is I don't know how profoundly this will really change retail as we know it. Retail has been going through what I would call a marathon change. The silver lining here will be that things like reduction in retail square footage, better management in inventory, maybe the marathon becomes a little bit more of a sprint. And we all start to do these things a little faster.
So how do you see, with kind of a diverse portfolio, how do you see the differences being impacting your brands between jewelry and accessories and kind of the apparel side? Do you see a difference in how customers are engaging with the brands, or just overall velocity within those different subsectors within?
So it's interesting. When you have an event like this, people tend to get more compassionate, if you will. And we've seen some interesting things from some of our customers. We had a customer with our Judith Ripka brand. When we ship to our customers, we tie our packages with these beautifully made ribbons. And this customer put together a face mask and used our ribbon as the strap. And she posted it to social media and reached out to one of our people. And we saw this and just said, wow, this is a real example of what people do in times like this. So we took that and made it into a campaign for the brand, where we've invited people to purchase goods for us. We'll ship the ribbon, and if they make a mask and post it, we'll send them a discount coupon or something along those lines. That's what my team put together, and it's exciting to engage in new ways, and it tends to bring us all together. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, I find it really inspiring seeing what a lot of the Blue Yonder customers are doing to kind of repurpose either their factories or help to service the need and really prioritize some of the community, which is something that's really exciting to see the retail community respond to, very similar to what you're talking about. It's just about seeing people repurpose and really rally behind each other and kind of come together it's an inspiring time for sure. We do have a question on here about kind of Blue Yonder's response to the customers that I just want to quickly respond to. So ours is about empathy. We have over 4,000 global customers at Blue Yonder, and we're focused on trying to help them manage their supply chain. So we have offers about supply chain visibility and pricing, and really just looking to support them and how to leverage their systems better, and really kind of tips and tricks. So we're working a lot with our users to try to help them optimize what they have and to be able to kind of come out of this in a really strong position, which is kind of where our focus is. A lot of the other questions really revolve around kind of, what do you think is the best strategy right now from your supply chain? Where would you focus kind of first, and then go from there? Like, what is the most important thing to be managing from a retailer standpoint, in your opinion?
So I would say, first and foremost, safeguard your relationships with your manufacturers. Find a way to collaborate fairly through this. There's no need to hurt your suppliers. So we all need to be a little more creative as it relates to the inputs, fabrics, trims, and finished goods as well. And if we all work together with retailers and suppliers, we will come through this. It's like any one of these other events that has happened. I remember in 2008, some people thought it was the end of the world, and for many it was. But we're going to come through this, and if you do the right thing through this, it will come back to you in spades when things turn back to normal.
I think that's a great approach. With that, Deborah, I'm gonna pass it back to you, because I think we've covered the majority of the questions.
Great. I'm just going to actually sum it up from what Bob discussed. Is we're seeing literally people across the globe who are, kind of lending a hand, creating new business models. We had a hospital reach out who needed sheets. I reached out to a department store. We're seeing this kindness throughout the retail supply chain. And I just want to, kind of say to everyone, and Bob has, certainly done his share as well. It's truly amazing. We're starting to see an industry which has historically been very competitive coming together to really, we're literally saving lives. And so I think that that's something we should all feel great about. And, there continues to be significant opportunity. So with that, Bob, as always, thanks for your amazing insights. Joanne, this was unbelievable, and look forward to doing this again next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.